Hello, welcome to my session. Thanks for joining. Yes, I'm Andy Boutle, Head of Digital Construction at Alec, out in Dubai in the UAE. The title of my presentation today, or my demo, if you like, is very catchy. Not moving from disconnected documents and spreadsheets to online dynamic resources. So essentially, I'm trying to show how you could move from Word and Excel to some form of online cloud-based database, and what we're doing currently in Alec. Okay, so I've got a few slides just to start off, and then I'll be going into to a bit more of a live demo. So to start with, just to articulate the challenge, I guess. So obviously, managing Word and Excel is not an obvious challenge, but as you start to produce whether they're trackers or tables, etc., that need more than one person's input or that need to be part of a workflow, it starts to get can be quite painful. So we have scattered Excel spreadsheets. They're not very dynamic at all, and they're often shared via email, if not via a system, a CDE solution, EDMS. We do a lot of manual data entry and often double handling and sometimes triple, quadruple handling information into tables multiple times, whether that's a table embedded in a Word document or what have you. We have Excel spreadsheets. If they're got macros or formulas, they're often very breakable, especially as you start sharing them around into different systems and different people, and prone to error. And then of course, these things are essentially disconnected, so they don't really connect to our systems. It does require manual updating, cross-checking, etc. Albeit that being said, of course, Excel is a really good tool, and it always has a place. But it's in these scenarios that it becomes a bit challenging. And I guess from a BIM or information management perspective, it's challenging. But these tools are used across all disciplines and functions in industry, so it's not just related to what we do in this audience. So we decided the opportunity was right to look at moving away from Word and Excel, and as part of our kite mark preparation for ISO 19650 certification, we looked at moving to some form of database solution, and for us we chose Mortar, and the next few minutes I'll be taking you through what we're doing with Mortar and how we've approached building those resources and how they work how they will work in practice for us. And the nice thing about once you have information in a database, of course, you can start to not only scale, but also then connect to the other systems and technologies we use where appropriate to try and automate some of this information in terms of reporting or tracking, etc. And certainly we've started to see an opportunity to work across some of our other departments, not just digital construction, BIM, but there's a number of other departments looking at moving from Excel workflows essentially into Mortar with us. Okay, so I'm now just going to close that and take you into Mortar. So this is like a project landing page essentially. The project I'm going to be taking you through today is this one here, our Alec Information Management Hub. So this houses all of our templates for information management and BIM. And just to get you started, so a really quick navigation down the sidebar here. So we've got what looks like a menu here of items. You'll see this is structured. Those of you familiar with ISO 19650. So for us as a lead appointed party, main contractor, I've got a home section, but then I'm following the 9650 core phases, I guess, of information management. So the tender response phase, appointment, mobilization, collaborative production of information model delivery, project closeout. So that's where our resources are built under those headings. If I expand one of these, and I'll come back to this shortly, but in Mortar, there's two things you create, either a table or a process. Once you've created a table and you may have different table views, you can embed those views into a process. So it's almost, if you imagine, and I'll show you shortly, BIM execution plan, it's a mixture of process with tables embedded, text, images, diagrams, etc. Oh, let me just click back on there. So down here under I've just expanded tender response. You can see that these top 5 items, they are processes, and then underneath we've got all the tables that sit in these processes, which are these icons. So you end up with quite a menu of items there. And then as we go down, it's a similar situation as we go down those menu headings, if you like. So just to take you through some of the steps here, the introduction and guidance. So this is effectively forms our templates project for generating resources. So the process we'd do when we get an incoming tender and there's some form of requirements for BIM, myself or my colleague Zara will create a fresh project in Mortar to start housing the templates and to start making them project specific. So the first thing we do once we've built that project is to then duplicate the template resources in this project over to the tender project. And down here, you see I've got a menu item here, publish templates to project. I won't take you through that, but there's a relatively simple duplicator tool that takes, I can select a number of resources in this templates project and push it to the project specific instance where we can start then putting the detail on them. So that's at high level how it works. So in the tender response phase, you'll see some of the bullet pointed resources that we develop. There's first, I'll come on to these two first, but anything with an asterisk is actually something that you generate as part of the tender response. So the usual suspects, the pre-appointment BIM execution plan, capability and capacity summary, mobilization plan, and risk register. So that would form part of our tender response. Then if we're successful and the project's awarded, of course, then we'd move to the appointment phase. So rather than recreating a post-appointment BIM execution plan, we'd either create a duplicate or move it under appointment over here and start to further the detail in that. And we'd also then, of course, produce a detailed responsibility matrix, our own exchange information requirements as a lead appointed party for our supply chain, task information delivery plan and template to give out to suppliers, and then rolling into the master information delivery plan. So I'm going to take you through the resources in these two sections today. So these are links to basically what sits in the menu to the left here. Let me start with tender response. So it's one of the same whether I click here or here, it will take us to the same item. So the first thing this shows us is it's a process map essentially for the tender response phase of the core activities that go on. It's a little bit blurred in this view, and I can shrink this menu bar as you need to, but there's also a link here that takes us to our company intranet page where the source files sit. So it just gives an idea of who's typically doing what in these activities throughout the tender response. So first thing is to nominate individuals to undertake the information management function, and we see that as a shared responsibility between our digital construction specialists and tendering. We'll obviously build the pre-appointment BIM execution plan. We'll assess any suppliers at that point in time, proposed suppliers, and do a summary, establish the mobilization plan, create any risks on a register, and then these resources will form our tender response with all the other things you typically do at tender phase. So I'll just come back out of that. So that gives us an idea of who does what. Then I'll actually take you into let's go into the information management function then. So this is something that is easily overlooked, but for me is really important. If I just expand this here, so what we've done here is created all of the core sub clauses out of ISO 19652 for lead appointed party, and there's one actually across the full ISO part 2 in here, main sub clause activities, as a starter, which can show typically who's accountable for all of the steps in the ISO. So the color coding, the funny green is client, typically client accountable. Lead appointed party is this blue, appointed parties is the purple, and again client there. So these are grouped up. We can open these up and typically see what are the things we should be doing, which clauses is it coming from, and who's responsible. So for us, I mean, that just gives an indication of what clients should be doing upstream of us, but we'd start to come in here, and again, this follows that process map that I just showed you for those steps. And then what we're doing here is that if I come across our internal departments or disciplines, showing typically who's accountable, or showing RACI, so responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed, or non-applicable. So that's the core clauses from the ISO for each one of those phases, if you like. If I just come out of that. So these are all views of the same table, but different filtered views. If I come down, or just collapse that one back. So then, what are we really interested in as an internal team is, well, who's responsible for doing what in the team, and is that understood? So here's our various departments, and I can expand any one of those to see, for tendering, what tendering in terms of information management accountable and responsible for. Well, there's only 2 items there. It's a relatively light piece, but we can see anything is filtered against responsibility and accountability. And again, if I move down, digital construction, so essentially the BIM specialist, of course, as you'd expect, and I can expand this table, there's far more tasks there. What we've started to do is actually introduce, of course, we've got the core things the ISO says we need to do, but then we've got internal activities, tasks, etc., that each one of our teams should do anyway as well. Probably that sit under there, so we're adding some of those tasks in as internal items, that we're responsible for doing as a standard. And I can go down, planning, commercial, etc. Let's expand all of these so we can see the whole lot unrolled. So the idea is each person from each team can come and check exactly what they're agree and check what they're responsible for. We've got some operational items, IT, of course, procuring software and hardware, logistics, etc., etc. So trying to get everyone to understand what they should be doing is probably key to setting a project up correctly for good information management. So that's the IM function, and how you might manage it in a database. I will now move on to the pre-appointment BIM execution plan. And again, like I said, 2 things you create in Mortar: processes and tables. So this is a process with embedded tables. So again, here's our contents, and that's structured. We deliberately structured that to what the ISO suggests a BIM execution plan would cover. Why not? And then you create your content under those. So if I start to open this up, it's probably just worth pointing out we have a version control table, because of course the idea is, and the hope is, that everyone or key individuals around the project team from different disciplines are invited into Mortar and go and find the information that's relevant to them, like I'm showing you now. But of course, we still need to export static outputs, certain revisions, and publish to, or share and publish to, common data environments, etc. So there is an export function. We can take these out to PDF or Word or whatever it is, CSV if it's a table export specifically. But at that point in time, we obviously want to record the version control. What was the revision, what was the status, the date, etc., etc. And again, you can embed, images. There's some text introducing it, showing a simple process of the various documents or resources and how they interact. There's an embedded table for reference documents. We can include project details that you can put in iframe, what it's called, to a Google Maps or something like that. That's a bit interactive, or it could be a static image. I'm just going to hover or pause on this one here. So key personnel for the information management function. Let's just expand that table. Actually, I won't, because I don't need to. So this table actually joins, and to go back to the point I said at the start, I think, about how we often end up double entering, triple entering, quadruple entering the same text into tables in different places of documents, and etc. This is where this can start to be really nice and start to automate some of that manual lifting. So this table is where we'd start to build the different roles and functions on the project, what party type they are, just for information there. And then as people are being appointed or we can put in the organization name, their originator code, their contact, etc. You may have an email address there as well, perhaps. But this table will then feed some other resources, and I'll come back to that later on. So we're not, again, putting in architect, originator code, company name, etc., etc. But I will come back to that. And then, I mean, I don't need to go through the various content. This is structured. The high-level responsibility matrix is an interesting one at the moment. We have a little bit of work to do here still. We've taken this at the moment. It's more of a, we get in this region, we get model uses or BIM uses, as clients like to put it, which is actually, things like model coordination, documentation, these headings down here, issue tracking, quantity extraction, etc., etc. So we've taken that as that table to cover that scope at the moment, which kind of works for us. But I think this comes to something different, and we end up developing a separate high-level responsibility matrix as the standard intends. But again, this is dynamic and links to our information requirements a bit later on, which I'll hopefully touch on if I have time. Okay, that's enough of taking you through the BIM execution plan. Also under tender response, so we've deliberately created a separate mobilization plan. And again, if I just expand this to show you what the content is, again, a version control table. Again, this is relatively light touch, but it just talks about how we'd mobilize resources. So any educational topics that would require to be delivered by different individuals, so our BIM specialist or digital construction specialist, to various different members of the project team, and describing what that would be. Any training for the delivery team, specifically on collaborative softwares that we're trying to encourage people to use and interact with. What those are, who would typically deliver that training, who it would be delivered to, and again a description. Mobilizing information technology, configuring and testing software, testing the project's information production methods and procedures, and developing shared resources. So it's not a big clumsy document. It's quite high level, but it sets out well, exactly what it says, a mobilization plan. And I think the key to making this a useful resource, rather than just ending at the tender response, would be to then, we're developing trackers at the mobilizations phase to then, start to monitor and build in, when are we doing these activities? Have they been done? Who's taking part? So you can start to track progress for mobilization across your supply chain. Okay. And then again, we have quite a simple information risk register here. This was an interesting one for us. We've ended up going down one route and back another. So we have an ERP system that's slowly being embedded across the business, where there is pre-qualification is intended to happen there. So we deliberately, pre-qualification and also risk registers. So we deliberately held back from developing that in Mortar, but I think that things happen in time, and it's getting around to being used properly for all disciplines as a risk register. At the moment, it's probably a bit early. So for the minute, we've just got a simple table in here to track risks, any comments, give a priority, etc., and how we might mitigate the risk. But potentially that may either connect into our ERP or be fed from our ERP in future. That's on a journey on that one. But again, working in an online database with an open API, it allows you these potential integrations to be realized. Okay, moving on to the appointment phase. Just checking how I'm doing for time. I'm going to have to speed up here. So again, we have a process map at the start. Starts to expand out, and we see some more disciplines or departments internally that need to interact and take part, which is the whole point of what we're trying to do here. I will go on to our exchange information requirements really quickly. So again, the idea, and again, it becomes a bit easier in an online solution to, apologies, I'm in the wrong item. There it is, this one here. So, the idea is that information requirements are cascaded down the supply chain, and they're specific for different suppliers. That in practice can be really, really hard and clumsy to do in a static documentation world. It's still challenging, quite honestly, I think, in an online database world, but it becomes easier. So you can filter requirements quite easily. So if you had this one's summary of the client's exchange information requirements. So that, again, this table joins back to the previous table I showed you, which is a high-level responsibility matrix. And then when these items are selected, it will deliver some of the information from those other cells in that other table. So we could start to filter this by things, activities that are related to certain subcontractors and not to others. We'd have any specific over and above requirements for us as a main contractor, and that may be some 4D specific parameters we require in native models. It may be IFC if it's not asked for by the client, etc., etc. So we can work out what those are. A bit on different types of information exchanges, whether it's regular, weekly or bi-weekly, or whether it's formal information exchanges. And again, so it might be the majority of this resource would be the same for all subcontractors, but you may filter and have different filtered views of certain tables depending on what the specifics were. I'll now want to focus on IDP, information delivery planning, because this is where this does become really game-changing for me. So the idea here is that, of course, we want to encourage our supply chain to build their task information delivery plans in Mortar, because it's dynamic and it will automatically then be a view in the master information delivery plan. We can also start to minimize human error, use tooltips and pick lists to stop people making errors and to highlight them when they are made. So it starts to not only improve quality of information entry, but also manage it better and more dynamically. So as a template, I've got down here, you can see all of these tables here. That's 5.44 TIDP. So these are the different. I built this around the UK National Annex, of course, but this could be adapted depending on the naming convention. But essentially, we have a different table for each field of the naming convention. I'm going to go to originator codes just quickly. So again, as I showed you earlier, that page in the BIM execution plan. Let me just quickly duplicate this tab. I'm going to go back to the BIM execution plan, section 4. So this table feeds the table that I was just on, and I'll show you how that works. So for example, let's go down here. So structural steel subcontractor. I'm going to put in a random, we'll call them random. It's the company name. RDM is their abbreviation, their originator code. If I come back over to here and just refresh the page, this table is joined with that table, so you can see because this column is joined with the previous one, structural steel subcontractor, it's now automatically told me the code from the other table is RDM, and the organization is random. So that would start to build the codes in the originator table from that previous table that's kept up to date in the BIM execution plan. So we've got a number of different other ones there. So there's the project, there's the functional breakdown, the standard form code. So you'd build these out as per the agreed information standard and the various pick list codes. All of these tables are referenced into my IDP table, which is down here. Actually, it's right at the bottom there. Information delivery plan. So here's my default view. Now I've got different views here. I've got TIDP views for different suppliers or subcontractors, and then we've got an MIDP. These views are embedded in the processes up here. So if I go to task information delivery plan for Alec, for example, here it is. So we have a direct works team that do some engineering design on top of for the structural concrete, etc. And obviously we produce information generally. So our TIDP would be delivered here. So as an author, I'd go in here and give it a title. I then have a pick list to say where I'm from, just like with Excel. What's the spatial breakdown? What's the form of information? And these pick lists can be dynamic. You can copy and paste just like you can in Excel. There we go. We can start to enter the data, and then we've got a nice concatenation script here that then builds that concatenation from the codes you picked upstream. And there it is, and that's how you'd build out your TIDP, and then again the MIDP is just a federated view, if you like, of everything. And I'm just conscious I'm probably out of time very nearly, so I'm probably going to wrap it up there. There's a few things I haven't covered, but I think that gives a good flavour of how you might approach some of these things. Certainly this is really good, and we've connected to systems like BIM 360 Docs, AConneX that's used in this region to do that, monitor that plan versus actual. And Mortar can go and fetch the metadata from various systems and bring it back into a table where we can manage and report progress. Anyone on the call who hasn't explored something similar to Mortar, I'd encourage you to take a look at it, because it does to add another dimension to what we do in IM, I think. Okay, thank you very much. I'll now stop and open up for any questions. Thank you.